On March 5, 1966, a major aviation accident occurred at the foot of Mount Fuji. Boeing 707, performing an intercontinental flight, 17 minutes after takeoff completely disintegrated in mid-air and crashed into the mountainside. All 124 people on board were killed. This disaster stumped the experts. They could not understand what happened to a plane that broke up in the air while in favorable weather conditions. In addition, it was the third airplane crash in a month in the Tokyo area and the second in 24 hours. The Boeing 707, factory number 17706, was manufactured in 1960. It was powered by four Rolls-Royce Conway 508 turbofan engines. The Boeing 707 passenger airplane is the first jet airliner in the United States and one of the first jet airliners in the world, which with its appearance in the early 1950s caused a worldwide boom in air travel. The ability of the Boeing 707 to cover a distance of more than 6,000 kilometers without landing at a speed of 950 kilometers per hour allowed it to become the main long-haul aircraft of the world's leading airlines in the 1960s/70s. The most popular passenger models of the airplane were the Boeing 707-120 and the Boeing 707-320. A total of 1,010 Boeing 707 airplanes of more than 20 different passenger, cargo and military modifications were produced during the period of serial production from 1958 to 1978. On the day of the crash, its service record was as follows: 67,404 takeoff landing cycles and 19,000 hours of flight time. On that day, the airliner was flying London-Hong Kong with intermediate stops in Montreal, San Francisco, Hong Kong, and Tokyo. The plane was supposed to land at Tokyo Airport at 16:45 on March 4, but due to bad weather conditions it landed at 1800 hours at Fukuoka Airport. And the next day the airliner flew to Tokyo, where it landed at 8:43 p.m. and began preparing for the flight to Hong Kong. On board were 113 passengers and 11 crew members. According to the established route, after takeoff the plane was to take a course to Oshima Island, then take FL 310 at an altitude of 9,450 meters and proceed to Hong Kong. Unexpectedly, before departure, the aircraft's commander, 45-year-old Burnham Dobson, contacted air traffic control and requested permission to make adjustments, changing the flight from instrument flight to visual flight and to follow the Fuji Rebel Kushimoto route. The crew composition of Flight BA 911 was as follows: Aircraft Commander, 45-year-old Bernard J. Dobson. A very experienced pilot, he had worked for BOAC Airlines for 19 years and 11 months, since March 6, 1946. He operated Canadair C-4 airplanes. In command of a Boeing 707 since December 3, 1960, prior to that he flew it as a co-pilot. Flew 14,724 hours, 2,155 of them on the Boeing 707. The co-pilot was 33-year-old Edward A. Maloney. An experienced pilot, he had been with BOAC Airlines for 8 years and 5 months, since September 29, 1957. As co-pilot of a Boeing 707 since June 26, 1962, he also had experience flying this aircraft as a navigator. He flew 3,663 hours, 2,073 of them in a Boeing 707. The flight engineer is 31-year-old Ian Carter. He had been with BOAC Airlines for 8 years and 7 months, since July 8, 1957. As flight engineer of the Boeing 707 since April 17, 1963. Flew 4,748 hours, 1,773 of them on a Boeing 707. The replacement co-pilot was 33-year-old Terrence A. Anderson. An experienced pilot, he had been with BOAC Airlines for 8 years and 5 months, since September 23, 1957. As co-pilot of a Boeing 707 since July 8, 1962, he also had experience flying this aircraft as a navigator. Flew 3,906 hours, 2,538 of them in a Boeing 707. The commander wanted to fly near Mount Fuji so that passengers could get a better view of this magnificent creation of nature. Having agreed on the route at 13:58, the airliner started moving toward the runway. As it did so, passengers saw the wreckage of an SDS-8 Douga plane that crashed on March 4 while landing in difficult weather conditions. Bernard Dobson lifted the airliner into the air. The weather was nice and clear. The plane gained altitude over Tokyo Bay and, at a speed of 680 km per hour, set a course for Gaetna. Then, smoothly descending, began to follow to Mount Fuji. Flying to leeward, eyewitnesses who saw the airplane noticed that a white trail, which resembled steam, began to form in its tail section. Then the airliner's tail stabilizers were ripped off, after which, one by one, the engines were ripped off. The cloud of white vapor, which stretched behind the airplane, expanded and grew larger and larger. The Boeing, having lost part of its structure, snapped into a flat corkscrew and began to fall. The nose section with the cockpit was torn off from the airplane from the severe overloads. The rest of the Boeing continued to fall, spinning in a flat corkscrew. At 2:15 p.m., the fuselage of the airliner fell onto the slope of Mount Fuji. The wreckage was scattered over a 16-kilometer-long field. At the same time, in the western part of Mount Fuji, was a member of the Japan Self-Defense Forces, who managed to photograph the falling plane. According to these photos, experts found out that there was no smoke or fire at the time of the airliner's destruction. Later, a movie camera was found among the wreckage of the plane. One of the passengers had been filming the view from the window before the recording was cut off. Experts saw that the image had become blurred. This indicated that there had been explosive decompression in the cabin, i.e. a sudden drop in air pressure due to depressurization of the aircraft cabin. During the investigation of the crash, it was found that first the right horizontal stabilizer and keel broke off, then 4 engines and part of the wing. After collapsed the fuselage, which experienced severe overload, being in a flat that guy. On close examination of the wreckage, experts saw that there were microcracks on the tailplane, near the bolt holes. Later, experts determined that they could not have been the cause of the crash. In addition, such destruction of the aircraft could have been caused by a load exceeding 110% of the maximum permissible. Moreover, after a close inspection of all Boeing aircraft in operation at the time, it was found that many of them had similar microcracks. The commission then turned its attention to the statement of one of the pilots who had been involved in the search for the crashed airplane. The pilot stated that while circling Mount Fuji in clear weather, he suddenly encountered severe turbulence, after which he was forced to return to the airport. There, he checked instrument readings, which confirmed that the plane had experienced severe overloading on severe turbulence near Mt. Fuji. This was also indicated by the pilots of other search planes. All the data collected confirmed that there were powerful air currents near the mountain slope. When approaching the mountain, the airplane hit a zone of abnormal turbulence, after which it crashed. The white vapor seen by eyewitnesses was flowing from the destroyed jet fuel tanks. Strong turbulence was created by the mountain slopes, forming powerful vertical flows. Air currents, when flowing around mountain slopes, deform and form a strong vortex that can be dangerous to airliners. After this airplane crash, instructions were created for pilots to establish minimum operating distances from mountains. This flight was to carry the crew of the 5th James Bond film, You Only Live Twice, including the famous American producer Albert Broccoli, producer and screenwriter Harry Saltzman, production designer Adam Ken, director Louis Gilbert and cinematographer Freddie Young. They were in Japan picking up locations for the film and were scheduled to take that flight on March 5. At the last minute, they learned that a martial arts festival would be held in Tokyo, and decided to stay another day, surrendering their tickets. This decision saved their lives.